Hello, this is Ross Bliley from the podcast Pigskin Tales. This podcast is sponsored by Sterling Soap Company. With products sold throughout 41 locations around the globe, Sterling Soap Company has a unique assortment of products to choose from for your loved one for the holidays. Handmade artisan soaps created by Roderick and Amanda Lovin since 2012, these products are affordable and provide great value. Act now and save on your shipping costs. If you purchase $75 or more, your shipping cost is free in the United States. Shop now online at sterlingsoap.com.
This year at the NFL Draft, dreams will be realized and lives will be changed forever. While future stars take the stage, you can elevate your own game. The Sports History Network is giving away a $75 gift card to Sterling Soap Company, offering 100% natural, fan-approved, locker room-tested, stellar grooming products. Step into legendary status and enter now at sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways. That's sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways.
I'd like to welcome everybody back to the Football is Family podcast. And one thing, if you follow me over the years, I talk a lot of football. We talk a lot of sports. But the one thing that's been very pressing to me, especially after my son committed suicide, is talking about being aware of yourself and being aware of your mental health and about being aware of your emotional health and striving to be better. And the guest I have today has a book out, and he'll introduce it. He'll introduce himself and talk about his book that kind of deals with this in a lot of ways. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jim Murphy. I'm a performance coach. I wrote a book called Inner Excellence.
It is, and like I said, I told you, I've read over some of it. It's life is hard to sit down and read a lot when you have $2 that go everywhere. But the one thing I've noticed about it is it's very positive. It's very affirming. It's something where you can look and see where you want to be, and you give ways to get there. A lot of stuff I've read that they say this is where you need to be, but they don't show you how to get there. And your book really kind of does that. Can you explain what got you into this topic?
Yeah, so my baseball career, I was a pro baseball player and played 5 years in the minors. And when it ended, it felt like my life was over. I had no more. That was my whole identity, was Jim Murphy, pro baseball player. And when it finished and got an injury and had to retire, it was like Jim Murphy, pro baseball player, became Jim Murphy nobody. And then same thing happened. I got a job coaching pro baseball, and then when I left it, it was like I was Jim Murphy nobody again. And so I was devastated. I was driving a truck for FedEx, and then ended up going to the desert to live a life of solitude to figure out what to do with my life. And that was when I decided to become a personal coach to pro baseball players and teach them how to have peace and confidence under pressure. And my first two clients did amazing. So then decided to put together a little manual for future clients. And then that became a 5-year full-time writing and research event that became the book Inner Excellence.
You said something in there, and I'm looking at if this is correct. You're drafted by the Cubs. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah.
I had a friend of mine who was drafted in the same year that Mike Piazza was, and he said that one of the things about being drafted does not necessarily mean that you're going to go right into major leagues. You have to go through a process. So you going through a process, not only playing in high school and college and then the minor leagues and playing and that takes up your whole life, right? It just takes up everything you are.
Mm-hmm.
And when you find your self identity is in something and then you get hurt, how devastating was that to who you were? You know, you got hurt, you had to stop what you've worked all your life for. How devastating was that?
Yeah, completely lost. I had no hope, no future, nothing. I felt like I was nobody.
Do you think that is something that, because there's people that are listening, Jim, and I love your openness so far, and if I go too far, please tell me. Do you think that there's people out there that aren't aware that one thing takes their life up until they lose that thing?
Oh yeah, I think that's most people. Um, so I just finished the Inner Excellence Retreat in Tijuana, Mexico yesterday. We built a house for a family with Youth with a Mission, Homes of Hope, and led this retreat. And um, I told them that, we're working on heart transformation. The heart, your spirit, your will, that's a part of your life that's running your life, along with your subconscious mind. And training it is the most important thing you'll ever do. And so I said, you can tell, get a quick glimpse of where your heart is because, well, when you're squeezed, what's in your heart's going to come out. If I squeeze an orange, we're not getting apple juice. We're going to get orange juice because what's inside is going to come out. And that's what happens when we get under pressure. And so we want to make sure that when we get squeezed, what comes out is inner strength and inner peace. And so I said, here's a couple of questions you can ask yourself to see where your heart is right now. So ask yourself, what have I thought about the most over the last few days and weeks? What have I worried about the most? What's kept me up at night? And what have I dreamed about the most? And that'll tell you where your heart is because what you love most is your God. That's what you worship. We all worship something. It doesn't matter if you're Buddhist or atheist or Muslim or Christian. We all have something that's at the top of your loves, and that's where your life revolves around, and you're stable as whatever that is.
I uh, I I have worked with in my profession is people who have come off addiction or are in the middle of addiction. And what you're saying there is that, and I believe it's even in the book there. I believe in your appendix it talks about the Alcoholics Anonymous, which is whether you agree with it or not, it's very powerful and it can apply to other things, not just alcoholism. It can apply to other things. And you mentioned it in there, which I thought was fantastic. Uh, but I talk to people in, at the time that they're talking with me, they're ready to change. But when you check back with them, you're talking about the God being whatever their mind is. Boy, things like that become their God quickly. They can't just leave it there. If somebody's listening right now, and I know you probably can't give a definitive answer because each person's different. What would be your recommendation for somebody to change a bad habit into a good one? Not overnight, but in a process. What would be your first instinct to tell them?
Well, if we want to just talk about changing habits, we need to replace it with something better. And so it's really hard if you just say, I'm going to stop doing something, stop smoking, whatever. We need to replace it with something better. If we look at smoking, for example, one of the big challenges with stopping smoking is that there's such a social component, and we're created for relationship. To be fully known and fully loved is our greatest need and greatest desire. And so if you feel like if there's a part of you that's if I take away my smoking, I'm going to take away my social circle, then it's going to be really, really hard to get to stop that habit. But in general, if you want to create a new habit, we add it to something else that you're already doing, a current habit. For example, brushing your teeth. Um, if you say balanced on one leg, you could work on your balance while you're brushing your teeth. Then there's a habit you can get into, or um, there's many things that you can do, but attaching it to a current habit is one way.
Yeah, when you play baseball, was there a pitch? What position did you play mainly?
I was an outfielder.
Outfielder. Was there a pitch that just drove you absolutely crazy?
Um, I would say I didn't really like the ones that were like 96, 97 coming at my head.
Little head action there. Uh, were there some things though that you just obsessed about hitting or fielding or anything like that just became who you are and that's all you thought about, when out on the field?
Well, as a pro baseball player and any baseball player, really, you're evaluated by your batting average, and so it's really there's so much failure as has been well documented in baseball, and so it's really hard to not put pressure on yourself. If you have four at bats, two hits or more is a good game. One hit or less is not. And so if you already got two at bats and you don't have a hit yet, now we've got some pressure. And if you're over three going into your last at bat, you really want to get a hit there. And so it can play a lot of mind games with you.
So how would you take and Well, like I said, your book really hits on that, the stuff that I was able to read on it that I really enjoyed on it. How do you take that type of pressure? And you say, squeeze orange, you're going to get orange juice. How do you take that type of pressure and use it positively in somebody's life so they can see who they truly are? I mean,
Well, the number one thing that we always want to do is we're creating a life. We've got to get out of and you just need to be successful with the short term thinking of I just want to make this putt or get a base hit or get a promotion. You need to think about your whole life, and that means heart transformation and who you're becoming is the most important thing about you. And so, since that's the case, we want to learn and grow every day, especially in self awareness. And so, with Inner Excellence, we start with how you want to feel in your life and how you don't want to feel. I call it WTF and DWTF. And because we're going to start to, once we clarify how you want to feel in your life, then we're going to look at develop habits of thought and action around that every day to get you more and more often into how you want to feel and aware of when you're moving towards that or away from it.
you, what is the number one, in your opinion, the number one hindrance for people for life changing? And I say that in general, but I think you know what I'm talking about. What's the number one hindrance do you think that causes people not to change?
Well, fear and self-centeredness, ego, all kind of goes together. All three of them work closely together: fear, self-centeredness, and ego. Self-centeredness is the default way of living, um, constantly thinking about yourself, but it leads towards fear in general. And so it's the greatest challenge that we face in performance and in life is getting in our own way and constantly thinking too high of ourselves or too low of ourselves.
I have, and I'll tell you this, I self-sabotage a lot. And when people say, well, what does that mean? It's I get in my own way. Something good's happening, I overthink and I underdo. Uh, do you find people that do a lot of that in your work?
Yeah, definitely. And so if you and I were working together, for example, what first thing I would tell you is what I tell all my clients is we got to be very careful about our words, the words that we use, because beliefs are what's running your life, and we want to make sure that we're going to expand what you believe is possible. So we never ever say anything that you don't want to continue as present tense. And so one thing that you could do, I would love you to consider, is to never say that I self-sabotage, because that's a present tense thing about what I believe you do not want to continue, correct?
Right, right.
So
Okay.
you would like the truth would be in the past I've self-sabotaged. And I think even more powerful to say it truthfully would be in the past, I don't know, it didn't always take advantage of every opportunity, for example. So say it in a positive way, because self-sabotage obviously is a negative. And so we want to, every day you're training your heart and your mind, creating beliefs, most often repeating limiting beliefs, confirming limiting beliefs. So inner excellence is about expanding what you believe is possible. So we start with how you talk.
Where your heart is, there your mind will be also. Where your heart is, there your life will be also. So if you fill your heart with good things, uh, and good thoughts, your actions could follow.
Right. Yeah. Everything we think, do, and say comes from our heart.
So if you, I know every person is different. Every person has their own background, their own baggage. Every person has situations where they came from. I'll tell you a story if I can. I want you to kind of tell me what you think about this. We live in a society here where I live right now where there's a lot of course it's everywhere, but there's a lot of meth use, lots of alcoholism, lots of drug use, and the value of human life is diminished through those actions and people's responses to it. However, a couple of years ago, my son committed suicide in 2022, and I started
Well,
to I started to adopt, well, it's right on my arm here and here, the semicolon, because I've struggled with it too. And I was going around, we're at a Christmas parade here. It's Waverly, Tennessee, just down the road from where I am right now. And I noticed on this truck the semicolon, and I knocked on the window, and a lady came out, and she was a survivor of suicide attempt.
well.
and the emotional. I knew who she was, but I didn't realize that. It's just the emotional. And I know you probably experience that a lot with your work. It's just a lot of emotion that comes from realizing that life is precious and worth living. I just find it hard, and I know you've dealt with it too. You probably saw a lot of this in baseball, but even what you're doing now. I find it hard to say that some people don't take life as powerful as it is. It's hard to see that, knowing that I would give anything to have my son back. People here are destroying themselves, and that lady finds her life so uplifting. It's just amazing. How would you, in your work, and again, your book, what I've been able to read of it, it's a very, I wouldn't say easy read, but it's a very uplifting read, and it's very, you don't want to put it down. And how would you encourage somebody to see their life in a positive way, like that particular lady?
So what happens to most people is they live their life, their current state of how they feel is based on the lens of their past. So that's just human nature. I see the world through my lens of the past, my experiences and how I've interpreted those experiences from the beliefs that I now have about myself and the world. And that's how I see the world because I don't see the world as it is. I see the world as I am, and you see the world exactly as you are, not as the world as it is. So none of us see the world as it exactly is. We see the world through the lens that we've created, our mind has created throughout the years, and our heart. And it's dotted with failures and fears. And so important to realize that you don't know the people that you're going to meet that can change your life and the experiences that you can have. Like one person, one book, one idea can change your life, and it's I think it's so important to get out of your comfort zone and let go of that. Understand that my ego is what's preventing me from growing, and if I want, I can live an extraordinary life just like anyone else that you read about or hear about. You can also live an extraordinary life. And a life that means a life with amazing experiences and deep, enriching relationships because you can love fully, you can love unconditionally. And when you do that, you can be fearless. And so I think it's so important for people to realize that you are not your past and anything's possible when you believe and you let go, if you can let go of your past and if you're willing to let go.
Do you, do you believe that that's the biggest, like people are trying to keep their head above water, but they put weights on it. Their past is pulling them down. Do you think that is the biggest hindrance for a for inner excellence, or at least one of the biggest hindrance?
Oh yeah, yeah. Most people can't let their past go. They carry it with them everywhere they go, and wherever they are, there's their past. And inner excellence is about having the humility to let go of your past and to say, um, to understand that, look, I did the best I could with what I had, and had I known better, I would have done better. Had I had more resources, I would have been better. But I did the best I could, and that's what I'm going to do today. And if you're willing to face your fears and willing to look foolish and be embarrassed and asking yourself, am I willing to have any feeling? And am I willing to have a really uncomfortable feeling and sit in my fear even if it doesn't go away? Because if you can answer yes to those things, then your life can start to change.
Okay, you can tell me that this is none of my business. This is your show. I'm just here. Was there a rock bottom for you? Just like a moment where you're like, I have to get better. I know it's after baseball, but was there just a moment where you realized there's got to be more to life than this?
Oh my gosh, yeah, multiple times. In the when I went to the desert, I spent 5 years full time writing and research, and spent my life savings. I was $90,000 in debt, and coming out of that, a series of little miracles. I met a New York City literary agent, and I got a major publisher. We got in bookstores around the world in 2009. But I was $90,000 in debt, and so um, I wrote the book to get clients. But I'm Denver 2010. I'm thinking I'm in. I was there to speak to some high school kids, and I was thinking, okay, so it's great the book's in bookstores around the world, but you have no money to hire someone to market the book. You don't know how to do marketing and you don't like promoting yourself. This is not a good marketing plan. And if no one hears about the book, no one will buy the book. And if no one buys the book, Barnes and Noble will pull it off the shelves. And your 5 years of full-time writing and research and going into $90,000 in debt could all be a waste. And you'll be a total failure if no one buys the book, and they pull it off the shelves. And I couldn't see how that wasn't going to happen. And so my mind started to spiral, and I almost had a mental breakdown. My knees were shaking, and it was very scary. It was actually the turning point in my life.
When you hit rock bottom, you realize I have to go up.
Well, I called my friend. I said, "Tell me what to do." I was so lost, and this is what happens when you isolate yourself. We've got to be really careful about isolation, because we're created for relationship. Our greatest need is to be fully known and fully loved, and our greatest fear is rejection, isolation. And just like in prison, it's the greatest punishment is isolation. I called my friend and said, "Tell me what to do." And he said, "Find a homeless person and help him." I look around the corner and there's a homeless harpist. I mean, I'd never seen one before, but this guy's playing a full-size harp. And I don't even know. I mean, those things are so rare. It's like, I don't even know if half the listeners know what that is, if they're, certain age. But, this thing that angels supposedly play in cartoons. He's playing this harp, and it's got this grocery cart full of stuff next to him. And I sit down and listen to him play, and then I look at my wallet, and I had $100, which meant I must have taken a cash advance because I had no money, and most of my credit cards are maxed out. But that day, I had $100 in my wallet, so I pulled it all out and gave it to him. I left and went back to where I was standing to run on the treadmill to try and breathe, get through the day. And I come back to that same area a couple hours later, and I'm sitting in the Starbucks. I just can't function, and so much anxiety, just staring into the abyss. And the homeless harpist walks past me and stops in my tracks and says, "Are you the guy that gave me that money?" And I said, "Yes." And he leaves and comes back with a box of chocolates and a bracelet and a card. And he gave all three to me. When I was writing the book, I asked this girl from my church. I said, "Hey, can you read this book and make sure it lines up with the Bible? I got to make sure that this book is filled with truth." And she said, "Have you ever heard of the word? I read your book. Have you ever heard of the word Zoe?" I said, "No." She said, "It means life, fullness of life. It's in the Bible a lot. I think that's what your book is about." I said, "Definitely. My whole life I've obsessed about being a superstar. When what I've always really wanted, I realize now, is to feel fully alive." So I started to orient my book around the pursuit of fullness of life and let everything else be added to you. So I'm in the Starbucks and I look at this homeless harpist card, and it said, "Thank you so much for caring for me. No one's cared for me like that before. Love, Zoe." I was like, "Your name is Zoe?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you know what your name means?" He said, "No." I said, "That means absolute fullness of life. I studied that for 5 years. I just wrote a book about it." And I give him the book and I never see him again. And so that was February 2010 during the Vancouver Winter Olympics in my hometown. And then that's my life started to change after that dramatically.
I try, my profession is deals with the Bible every day, all the time. That's what I do. And we're told that Christ came to give life and that more abundant. And I don't, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be religious or anything like that, but I'm a believer with you that if you have life, if you're just living, that is not a life to have. It's not a life to have. I want to have life that allows me to see past the gray clouds and to see that there's always a future. I tell people that I talk with that the only reason that I'm still sitting here right now, especially after what happened to my son, is because I always saw one more day and things will get better. One more day. This coming next year, my son died on his junior year, going into his senior year. This next year, my daughter becomes a senior. I get to see her senior year. My other daughter, if we let her live the way that she is going right now, we're going to see her grow up. When you talk about abundant life, I think there's things, and you may agree or disagree with this, that's fine. I think there's things out there that can help you live, but I don't think that those things are going to give you abundant life. I think you got to get that on your own and figure out what makes you satisfied in life. I don't think anybody else can give that to you. I mean, do you think so, or do you think it's?
Well, I think there has to be if you just try and pursue what I call lower level loves, like I spent most of my life pursuing lower level loves, which is, just satisfaction and pleasure and achieving my goals. And unless you devote your life to a purpose beyond yourself, you're never going to be fulfilled. There has to be a purpose beyond yourself, and that's kind of the start. We're created for love. We're hardwired for love, and and so if this unconditional love. But the great thing is unconditional love is fearless, and so if you want to be fearless, that's the way to go.
Let me ask you one more question, and then I want you to, you know, sum up a couple of things for yourself and tell us where we can get your book. And Mr. Jim, I appreciate this was awesome. I enjoyed every bit of this. Uh, if you could give somebody, and this is overarching because every person is different, no one is the same. But if you can give the listeners here one piece of advice to kind of help them along their way to inner excellence, uh, what would that be?
Well, on a short term thing, if you're a listener right now and you're having a tough time in your life, if you bend over backwards to help someone else out, that helps you out even more. And so that's on a short term thing. On the long term, um, if you devote your life to a purpose beyond yourself, then you've got a chance to fully live. And we can all do that. We can all change the world, but we can all love greatly and love unconditionally. And every single person can do that. And when you do that, you can be fearless.
Tell us where we can find your book and how we can follow you on social media.
So the book launched this morning, April 29th, in bookstores all over the world, in North America, rather, in English, wherever books are sold. You can also get it on Amazon. And yeah, and I'm on social media, Inner Excellence, Jim Murphy. And I have a website, innerexcellence.com, and I've got a newsletter that kind of shares everything. If you go to my website, you can see everything that we're up to.
I will, innerexcellence.com.
.com.
I will go on to that as soon as this is over and sign up for the newsletter. You, like I said, for what I was able to read, you are a genuine guy who, talking to you, has definitely proved that has a caring heart, that has looked past where he was from and what he went through to become better. And when you say that you want people to, or we would hope for people to go better, that's what you are doing. You are living your words. And it just, we've only talked for 30 minutes, and I can see not only do you have amazing hair, and I'm respecting the hair game. I really am. I don't have that. I have two daughters. But I not only, that's superficial. I know, guys. I know. But
That's
his
right.
hair is amazing. It is. But not only do you have a good way of saying it, but you have a good heart that really looks for other people. Your example is amazing, and I wish more of us had that. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And, I really appreciate your openness and vulnerability, because there's so many people need hope. And I think that's something that you're offering.
Well, that's something that we all need, and you help that. And I'm just glad to be talking to you now. So thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so much for having me.
And y'all, thank you for listening to the Football's Family Podcast.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you got to do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.